Hello everyone, I hope you enjoyed a little intro montage. Welcome to another showcase. This time around we have the BCM01 by Belquint. I think that stands for Battle Cruiser something. Not the most creative name, but you know what? I find names to be pretty difficult myself, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. And now for the actual review. So first off, this thing's armor. Now, don't get me wrong, it is actually a pretty smart armor scheme, but let me show you a little bit closer what it's like. Now keep in mind, this vehicle is almost 400,000 materials, and let's see how much armor it's got. So we've got alloy, diagonal, heavy armor beams, and that's it, pretty much. That said, there is armor around all of the vital components, so that is smart. The armor is smart. It's well done actually, but there just isn't enough meat around the bone, if you get my drift. Okay, it's just not enough for a vehicle of that size. If you're fighting something that is smaller, then this is great. This is just perfect. For a smaller vehicle, perfectly fine. Fighting smaller targets, perfectly fine. Fighting something of its size, or even worse, something bigger, it's gonna get pierced and damaged, and yeah, it's not pretty. This thing turns into confetti pretty handily. And there is a significant amount of heavy armor, despite all that. You know, I'm saying it's not enough meat. There is heavy armor, and that means it is kind of heavy, and as such it requires, well, I don't know how much it requires the vertical thrusts, the vertical propellers, but I mean, they are spinning constantly. Not very much, but they are there. And I also noticed that there are hydrofoils, so this thing is not the most buoyant. So yeah, the armor, it's smart, but it's not enough, and it's a bit heavy for what it is, for comfort, you know, if it loses buoyancy. Oh, and there are even water pumps and helium pumps, so a bit heavy and just not meaty enough to really tank anything in its size class or cost bracket. Would be one of the major downsides. Now, the other thing is just overall defense. It's got a nice pair on it, a nice pair of decoys right here. It's got a set of, well, not a set, it's got one large radar decoy and one large heat decoy, or flares. They're pretty good. They will do the job, definitely. That said, decoys were changed to scale off surface area, meaning you might get actually more value out of using, let's say, 4 medium radar decoys with not too much stagger, because you do want to have a lot of signal up in the air at once for something this size. But yeah, using 4 mediums of each kind, like so radar and flares, would probably give you better value. And you know, because they're large, the thruster and the fuel tank on a medium, they would take up less of the overall decoy than on a large. So just small details, but still. It's got these Sea-Wiz, but they're actually, if I bring that up, they're actually simple weapons. So it's got flares and mostly decorative Sea-Wiz. It does have a radar scrambler, not a radar scrambler, an ECM scrambler, which, you know, adds to its defenses. So missiles are not a huge threat, but just overall damage, like APS, maybe even crams, although we'll get to that. This thing is pretty fast, so I'm not too worried about crams. But APS will definitely be a significant threat to this thing. I don't think there is smoke on it, or at least not a significant amount. I didn't notice any smoke dispensers, which is not the worst, but I mean, if you fight the later factions or the lightning goods with this much armor, it's gonna disintegrate definitely against lasers. Never mind particle accelerator cannons, but there isn't much you can do for that. So yeah, no lambs, no missile interceptors, which, I mean, missile defenses are alright, but you could use the missile interceptors against crams as well, which could be a threat. So yeah, just a little bit cardboard, basically. No shields as well, I don't think. I'll double check again. But yeah, I didn't see any shields. Yeah, I didn't think so. Most of this thing's energy goes into the ECM. And that's it. So just smart armor, but not very much of it. Decoys and ECM. That's about it. So yeah. The other thing is going to be the shells. The shells, again, they're not bad. It's not a mistake, but almost every shell is a chemical shell and not a particularly fast one at that. So all the main guns here, we have an inertial fuse, basically a frag shell, a little bit spicier frag shell, but still mostly a frag shell. We've got a heat shell, and we've got a HESH shell, and I'm losing my voice. Alright, I found my voice again. So anyway, as I was saying before I just kind of went mute, is basically this thing uses a lot of mostly chemical shells, and the main issue with that is that lambs have a field day with chemical shells. They will destroy them. And so, you know, this thing has relatively little defense, and it does have a lot of firepower, like 200 firepower. That is pretty good, but lambs will negate a lot of that if, you know, you put it up against something with strong lambs, and that is potentially very scary, right? If your main advantage is that you have a lot of firepower, but you're a glass cannon, and then your firepower doesn't actually hit the enemy, then what do you have left, right? It's just, it is a bit of a gamble, basically. It does have a decent amount of firepower in kinetic shells, but it's strictly on those two guns, those two low caliber guns, but they still, you know, if you check the tooltip, it's got a lot of firepower in those two guns, but those two guns can only fire on the left side. So if the enemy is on the right, then you're stuck with pretty much entirely chemical shells. Anyway, now for the positives. This thing, as you can see right now, is moving along at 38 meters per second. It can reach up to about 40. Now, it typically goes around 38, 39, 37 in a straight line. It might go a bit slower when turning. But this thing is fast, and that is pretty good, especially for a ship. And for a glass cannon, you could use this, thanks to its speed, as a very good support vehicle, right? If you've got a very tough battleship that can take the enemy fire, you bring this thing along and you just add that much firepower. And it's not going to slow down your fleet. You could also use it in defense against smaller vehicles because it's fast, so it can cover a lot of territory. And that would be really good as well, because you can keep it in position and intercept other targets with it pretty nice. And overall, you know, despite me not agreeing with the amount of defense on this thing, it's still built pretty smart. Like the armor, it may be thin, but it is well built. Because, well, that's the wrong overlay, because those are slopes, so that means there's a gap, so it's going to be very heat and HESH resistant, and then there is additional armor around the turrets, around the ammo compartments, and so on. So The armor is very efficient. It is used and applied locally around vital parts of the ship, rather than just having a very thick belt all around. So that's a pretty good idea, I would say. It's pretty good use of resources. The bottom has a little space here, and it's 3 meters thick overall, which means it's unlikely to have, or at least it's not as easy for something hitting the bottom to just instantly pierce and hit your core components as well. And yeah, it's just it's very smart. There's just the main mistakes on this vehicle aren't like mechanic. They are mostly design choices that I don't agree with. But the actual building is very smart, is basically what I mean here. The turrets are ejectored, which is also extra survivability. It's well done. And as I was saying earlier, this thing has a lot of overall firepower. If the enemy doesn't have strong lambs, and, you know, unless you're shooting something like flying squirrels, because obviously that's going to be really difficult to hit with that kind of weaponry. But if you use this, you know, in its strong suit, this thing is going to cause a lot of damage. That's a lot of damage. Insert a meme here, because you're going to need a lot of flex tape to fix what this thing can do. Basically, it's just so much firepower. It's a bit too bad that, you know, the design choice also means that there's a decent amount of firepower that's locked to one side only, but there's just so much of it, I don't think it's a big issue. And finally, big plus of this thing, it looks amazing, and it looks amazing while being asymmetrical. So major props to Belquint for making this thing really quite nice and also asymmetrical. I have a special thing for well-made asymmetry, and this thing definitely fits that bill. It's really nice. I'm also a big fan of the way the slopes are done. I'm not, like, usually a lot of people for large ships, they will stagger slopes, like 4-meter slopes. And it's pretty apparent, and it looks a little bit jagged, I guess. And the way Belquint used the applique panels to make essentially 8-meter slopes or 6-meter slopes and staggering it like this, I think it looks just that much better. I personal preference here, but I think that's just really nice. The bow of this thing is also just really nice. Mimic work. So, you know, it's not greeble to hell and back, but it's still really... I love this thing. There's no words other than that. It's just, I love it. It's asymmetrical. It looks good. There's a bit of artifacting, like right here, which easy fix, you know, just do something like this and then up and down 3.01 and suddenly the top of the rangefinder disappears and you're done. So tiny little thing that triggers me, but whatever. It looks amazing. It looks amazing. So thanks again to Belquint for sending this thing in, calling it the Thing because at this point it's, you know, BCM01, so Battle Cruiser something. But yeah, really nice vehicle. So thanks for sending it in. And that's going to be it for this video. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, if you'd like to see more, consider liking, subscribing, commenting, that kind of stuff. Helps me out. And yeah, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.